I promised to read you a story about the autumn equinox, and I'm going to start now. So this is the children's story, and this is one I wrote and read long ago now, several years ago now. So I'll begin. Long ago, when our ancestors lived on the land, they would perhaps have had a druid who may have lived in the village or may have visited at special times of the year. This was a special time. Once again, the little children, Tansy and Neil, had noticed that the day was as long as the night. They heard the grown-ups saying something about balance. Daylight would last just as long as night time, so the village would have another festival, a gathering of friends and family. This was another harvest. Perhaps the men would gather hops and make some kind of beer. Maybe there were lots of apples already on the trees. The days were still very warm here in Britain, but the nights had started to get a bit chilly. Everyone in the village were looking forward to a visit from the druid. He was a very wise man who had studied for years. He played a little harp, and he carried that around with him, and he told stories. It was good to sit around a warm fire in the evening with their families, all cuddled up to Mum and Dad, and listen to the beautiful music and the stories of the gods. Tansy and her cousin Neil were getting excited and were spending the day doing their best to help Mum and Dad. They were learning what fruit they could pick and which ones would give them a tummy ache. The druid arrived a day before the festival. He had walked 3 days and 3 nights to get to their village in time to lead the celebrations. His feet were sore and he was tired from all the walking, so that evening he came and spent with Tansy's family. The druid ate his meal with them and sat down to rest his poor, sore feet. Tansy sat down with him and asked him to tell her who was special at this time of the year. The druid thought for a moment and looked down at Tansy. Well, this is a time of harvest, for fruit and for late grains. The mother has been very good to us, he said. But the mother goddess was always special, said Tansy. Yet she is but because she produced lots of fruit, grains, and a few berries as well. I think we'll make her a special feast. What's her name? Asked Tansy. She's known by different names in different places, but for here we will speak of her as Danu, said the druid. Now Danu was the mother of the Celtic gods. She was sometimes called Danu of the flowing waters, and many rivers all over the world are actually named after her. Because the mother Danu brought us such a lot to eat at this time of the year, we need to say a big thank you, and we must share some of our fruit and berries with the animals as well. So that night the children went into their beds, wrapped up in furs because the night was cold, and slept deeply and well, ready for the big festival the next day. The sun was already up when the children awoke. They quickly got themselves ready and had some breakfast of hot cooked oats and some fresh milk on top, with a little honey to sweeten it. Out in the middle of the village, the druid and the elders of the village had already begun to make a special table. They'd woven some willow and made a basket, and they were filling the basket with fruits, apples and berries. The women had already baked some bread, twisted the dough around to look like a braid. People bought things to sit on, furs and a piece of animal hide, and gradually the area filled up with people. There were drums, some pipes, and some people had shakers, hollow things filled with dried seeds, and this made a wonderful noise when you shook them. One of the women, an elder priestess, and the druid stood up and called the meeting to order. They asked everyone to be quiet and call for the mother goddess to join them. Everyone stayed very quiet, but no one saw a goddess. Instead, a red fox, a vixen, came walking towards the people. She walked all around the outside of the gathering and then went and sat down to watch. The noise started, drums, pipes, singing, clapping, and all the time the red vixen just sat, listened, and watched. The Druid called for a blessing on the harvest of the fruit, and everyone prayed and thanked the mother for all she had given them. Then the Druid took a smaller basket of fruit, which had a little handle, filled it with apples and berries, and walked very slowly towards the fox. She never moved. He put the basket down in front of the fox, took a step backwards, and he bowed. The fox stood up, and she also bent her head. And then she picked up the basket in her mouth and walked off out of the village and into the woods. Everyone was very pleased, and then fruit was shared out to the families, and more taken to the outskirts of the woods and left for the fairy folk. There was dancing that night and music, and everyone had a lovely party. And guess what happened the next day? No, you'll never guess. Tansy and Neil were playing in the field next to the village when a red fox with an empty basket came walking towards them. They stood very still and bowed like the Druid had done, like that. And the fox bent her head, dropped the basket, and walked off again. Tansy and Neil took the basket back to the Druid, who was still staying in the village, and he looked very surprised. He said, "Children, you have been noticed by the mother, and she is pleased with you for being such good children. Learn your lessons well and work hard, and you will work for the goddess one day yourself." Why do you think he said that? You don't know? Then I shall tell you that some folks say that the goddess Danu is able to change herself into a red fox, a lady fox, called a vixen. She walks around freely, and not many know which one she is. So next time you see a red fox, stand still and whisper to her, "Bless you, mother." And if it's her, she will look you straight in the eye and bless you with her thoughts. The end.